all the way up to the resurrection. Go to John 20. Just jump 19 chapters. In the only gospel that says the two things I'm reading to you, by the way. Only John says, no man has seen God at any time, but Jesus has exegeted him. Only John says that. And only John tells this story from John chapter 20. Verse 26, after 8 days, his disciples were again inside and Thomas with them. Jesus came, the doors being shut, and stood in the midst and said, "Peace to you." And he said to Thomas, "Reach your finger here. Look at my hands. Reach your hand here. Put it into my side. Don't be unbelieving, but believing." And Thomas answered and said to him, "My Lord and my God." And John is the first gospel writer to put that into words. And I don't want to be over dramatic, but I can't help but point this out with a spotlight. Nobody in the ministry of Jesus had dared to call him God until Thomas touched his nail-scarred hands and saw the resurrected Jesus and went, "I just saw the face of God." When I watched Jesus pre-cross, I saw how God loved. I saw how God responded. I saw what God moves like. But when I see Jesus post-resurrection, I see God. God as me, resurrected into the earth, a brand new man. No longer old Adam hiding out in a bush somewhere wearing clothes, but a new man standing in front of me, still carrying the scars of who he was when he was on this earth, because who he was when he was on this earth doesn't cease to be relevant any more than who you are on this earth will cease to be relevant when you get over there. But who you are on this earth is no longer who you will be forever in him. And Thomas goes, "Only God could do that. My Lord and my God, you must be the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You're not a God, little g. You are big G God." I see him standing in front of me, and that is Jesus. Now, all of that's wonderful. Great, well and good, but there's a flaw in my message right here. There's a massive flaw in my message, and I'll go ahead and point it out for you because it's pretty obvious. I said to you, "Wouldn't you like to have an encounter with God?" And everybody nodded their head because, well, you wouldn't want to nod your head no, because that would be odd. But you'd nod your head yes, because why not if I can have an encounter with God? And then I introduced to you that in the Old Testament, God did a bunch of stuff any old way God wanted to show God. But then here comes Jesus, and God shows the world himself through Jesus. And then Jesus comes out of the grave, and you get to touch him and go, "There's God." And the flaw in my message is there's no physical Jesus here tonight to reach his hand out and for you to grab a hold of. Because if we had that, well, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus is Lord. If we could but see him and behold him in his glory, we would know, as John said, we would be as he is in this world. But even though that is a major flaw, it's not one that Jesus did not fix if we're paying attention. Because honestly, if he didn't fix that, in my opinion, it's a fatal flaw to Christianity. Now let me tell you why I think it's a fatal flaw. Because a fatal flaw is something that cannot be overcome, that because it exists, there's going to be death to the structure. If there's a fatal flaw in a building construction, it is a matter of time until the building falls. Because the flaw isn't a problem, the flaw is fatal. If your doctor says to you there's a fatal flaw with one of your organs, he doesn't mean you're going to have some trouble. He means you're going to die. So when I say there's a fatal flaw in us not being able to see Jesus, I mean it. I think that if it were our only way to encounter God was to encounter him through the physical Jesus, it's a fatal flaw of Christianity because none of us get to encounter the physical Jesus, and therefore all we just have is a head full of stuff. Maybe you got some scriptures, maybe you got some songs, maybe you got a testimony, maybe you think you've seen a miracle here or there. But if the only way to see God is through seeing him through the physical Jesus, to touch Jesus, then there's no hope. But Jesus, just before he goes to the cross, plugs the fatal flaw. Because he knows where he's going. He's heading to Calvary. He's going to walk up that hill and drag his cross, and he knows he's going to die, and he's already prophesied he's going to raise again. He says, in 3 days I'm coming back. So he knows he's going to resurrect. He actually knows how the story ends, and he knows that there's a flaw coming up in this faith, that he's not going to be there forever. In fact, he exposes the flaw in John 14 when he goes, I'm not going to leave you guys orphans. Because that's what it's going to look like, right? It's going to look like you've been left orphans, because he even says, I'm going to go back to my Father in the glory that I had with the Lord before this began. I'm going to have that glory with him again. And there's that flaw. We're about to be left alone. There's no way that we get to see God.